Hello, in this video you will learn how to pronounce the time in Spanish. La hora, la hora. The most common question is, ¿Qué hora es? ¿Qué hora es? Which means, what time is it? To reply to the question of ¿Qué hora es? You begin by saying son las, which means it is. For example, son las dos, which means it is 2 o'clock. Son las 2:30, which means it is 2:30. As a reminder before we move on, son las is how you usually begin the sentence. Look at the clock this blue arrow is pointing to. It is la una, la una, la una. This is because the shorthand is pointing at the 1 and the longhand is pointing at the 12. Now the arrow is pointing at another clock. The time here is las siete, las siete, las siete. We know this because the shorter hand is pointing at 7 and the longer one at 12. Finally, this clock reads las tres, las tres, las tres. Overall, these three clocks are all o'clock, and the writing below is how you say them in Spanish. Now we will learn how to say half past in Spanish. What's the time here? In Spanish, we say las 10:30. Las 10:30. Las 10:30. What about this other clock? It is las 8:30. Las 8:30. Las 8:30. The time on the left is 10:15. In Spanish, the translation is las 10:15. Las 10:15. Las 10 because the shorter hand is pointing to 10, and y cuarto as the longer hand is pointing at 3. The time on the right is las 5:15. Las 5:15. You can see that there is a pattern of saying the hour number first, and then y cuarto follows. Therefore, what is the time here in Spanish? Las 12:15. Las 12:15. And for the final time for 15:15, in Spanish, we say las 8:15. Las 8:15. Now we will focus on how to say the times that are 1/4 to. It begins the same as the previous times, where you begin by mentioning the word las, followed by the hour number. However, here, instead of saying y cuarto, which was for 1/4 you say menos cuarto. Menos means less in Spanish, so it is like saying the hour minus a quarter. For example, the clock the arrow is pointing to is las 12 menos cuarto. Las 12 menos cuarto. Las 12 menos cuarto. What about the time on the clock on the right? It is Las 6 menos cuarto. Las 6 menos cuarto. Any guesses on how to say the time on this clock? Las 7 menos cuarto. Las 7 menos cuarto. And this clock? Las 10 menos cuarto. Las 10 menos cuarto. Now for the final section, we will learn how to pronounce minutes past an hour and minutes to an hour. Before we look at specific times, I wanted to show a visual picture to show when we would use y and menos. When the minutes hand is pointing to a number on the right of a clock, we say y. And when the minutes hand is pointing to a number on the left side of the clock, we say menos. For example, here we say las 2:15. Las 2:15. And here we say las 2 menos cuarto. Las 2 menos cuarto. This will hopefully be made clearer in the following slides. For example, this clock has a time of las 11:05. Las 11:05. This is how to say 11:05 in Spanish. Las 11:05. Just to be clear, we say cinco when the minute hand is pointing at 1 because 5 minutes have passed. If you're struggling, remember the previous diagram. Since the minutes hand is in the orange shade, we know to use y instead of menos. Here's another example. What is the time here? The answer is las 8:05. Las 8:05. On this clock, the minutes hand is pointing at 2, which means that 10 minutes have passed. This means that the time is las 11:10. Las 11:10. Las 11:10. And what about this time? Las 5:10. Las 5:10. These examples show 20 minutes past. The clock on the left shows las 3:20. Las 3:20. And the clock on the right shows las 6:20. Las 6:20. And finally, what time does the clock on the left show? It shows las 2:25. Las 2:25. And what does the clock on the right show? Las 10:25. Las 10:25. Now we are on to the minutes hand in the green shaded part of the clock. Can you guess what the time is here? In English, we would say 25 to 10 because there is 25 minutes until 10 o'clock. In Spanish, we say las 10:25. Las 10:25. Which directly translates to 10 minus 25. Las 10:25. When following the same rule, the time shown on this clock would be la 1:25. La 1:25. 25. When the hour hand points to the 1, this is the only time it will be la and not las. The time shown here is las 3 menos 20. Las 3 menos 20. Las 3 menos 20. And the time on the right shows las 12 menos 20. Las 12 menos 20. Now the minutes hand is pointing at 10. So in Spanish, the time being shown is las 8 menos 10. Las 8 menos 10. And for this clock, son las 3 menos 10. Las 3 menos 10. Finally, before a short quiz, this time shows 5 minutes to 4. In Spanish, we say las 4 menos 5. Las 4 menos 5. Lastly, las 9 menos 5. Las 9 menos 5. In the following 10 slides, different times will be shown, and you must say the time in Spanish. You have approximately 3 seconds to guess each time. You can pause the video anytime if you would like to have more time to think. Las 2 menos cuarto. Las 8:25. Las 12 menos 10. Las 12:10. Las 9. Las 8 menos 5. La 1:15. Las 11:20. Las 5:05. Las 6 menos 20. Lastly, we will discuss the different parts of the day, followed by sentences with these words. La mañana. La mañana. El mediodía. El mediodía. La tarde. La tarde. La noche. La noche. La medianoche. La medianoche. Son las 8 de la mañana. Son las 8 de la mañana. Son las 8 de la mañana. Son las 6 de la tarde. Son las 6 de la tarde. Son las 10 de la noche. Son las 10 de la noche. Es el mediodía. Es el mediodía. Es el mediodía. Es la medianoche. Es la medianoche. Thank you for watching. If you would like to complete the related exercises to practice, you can get them in the link in the description.